Okay, so hello everyone and good day. My name is Asher Polos Ebligno, and for today's video, I'll be tackling to you my overall knowledge and learnings about the Afro-Asian literature. But first, let's have a background of Afro-Asian literature. So, Afro-Asian literature mirrors not only the customs and traditions of African and Asian countries, but also their philosophy of life, which on the whole are deeply and predominantly contemplative and hauntingly sweet. Afro-Asian literature is the reflection of the storm and the stress of developing nations seeking a place under the sun, which every student must understand so he may know how this literature affects the history and culture of a nation. So in simpler thought, Afro-Asian literature refers to the literary output of the various countries and cultures in Africa and Asia. So in lesson 1, which is the African literature, the highlight of this lesson is Chinua Achebe, which is a well-known African author. He's the one who wrote the poem Africa. And African literature from Africa is either oral or written in African and Afro-Asiatic languages. Examples of pre-colonial African literature can be tracked back to at least the 4th century AD. The best known is the Kebra Negast or Book of Kings. A common theme of the African colonial period is the slave narrative, often written in English or French for Western audiences. Next is in lesson 2, which is the ancient Egyptian literature. I learned that it comprises a wide array of narrative and poetic forms, including inscriptions on tombs, steel obelisks and temples, myths, stories, and legends, religious writings, philosophical works, wisdom literature, autobiographies, biographies, histories, poetry, hymns, personal essays, letters, and court records. In lesson 3, the Arabian literature, I learned that Arabic literature is the writing of both as prose and poetry, produced by writers in the Arabic language. The Arabic word used for literature is adab, which is derived from the meaning of etiquette. In lesson 4, which is the Chinese literature, I learned that Chinese literary works includes fiction, philosophical and religious works, poetry, and scientific writings. The dynasty eras frame the history of Chinese literature are examined one by one. Next is we have the Indian literature. From this literature, I learned that traditionally Indian literature was one of verse and oral. The ancient literary creations in India are the Vedas, the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata. So in this lesson, I learned that Jewish literature, in the next lesson which is the Jewish literature, includes works written by Jews on Jewish themes, literary works written in Jewish languages on various themes, and literary works in any language written by Jewish writers. Next is we have the Persian literature. So in this lesson, I learned that Persian literature is a body of writings in New Persian, also called as Modern Persian, the form of the Persian language written since the 9th century with a slightly extended form of the Arabic alphabet and with many Arabic loanwords. Next is we have the Japanese literature. This is the body of written works produced by Japanese authors in Japanese or in its earliest beginnings, at a time when Japan had no written language, in the Chinese classical language. Both in quantity and quality, Japanese literature ranks as one of the major literatures of the world. And also, Japanese literature comprises of haikus, poems, haikus and poems. Next is we have Korean literature. Korean literature is the body of works written by Koreans, at first in classical Chinese, later in various transcription systems using Chinese characters. and it is written in Hangul. So I learned that Korean literature is merely influenced by Chinese fictional characters in terms of creating characters in their stories. And classical Korean literature has its roots in traditional folk beliefs and folk tales of the Korean peninsula. Next is we have the Vietnamese literature. I learned that the body of literature in Vietnam is produced by Vietnamese speaking people, primarily in Vietnam. So in this lesson, I learned that Vietnam's literature was highly expressive and was able to reveal the culture and history of the nation, such as the average crossing of a road in the country and the many Buddhist poems created in the Tran dynasty reflecting on life and Buddhist tradition. And lastly, we have Indonesian literatures. Indonesian literature is the poetry and prose writings in Javanese, Malay, Sundanese, and other languages of the peoples of Indonesia. They include works orally transmitted and when preserved in written form by the Indonesian peoples, oral literature, and the modern literatures that began to emerge in the early 20th century as a result of Western influence. So all in all, to synthesize my learnings, I learned a lot from the different countries and their literatures. All of them signifies their cultures, traditions, and beliefs as well as their perspective in every literary writings. I gain new set of knowledge, and I see that every literary pieces presented are influential and knowledgeable. Also in pertaining to my learnings, it widened my mind and knowledge about the different literatures, specifically in Afro-Asian countries. These literatures has their own uniqueness and style. Also, the people behind those literatures have wide range of ideas in mind in crafting those. So that would be all for my discussion about my knowledge and gained insights about the Afro-Asian literature. And that's all. Thank you.